welcome back to another devlog. This is week 94. So this week I started off where I left off last week, which was to make sure that the is this frozen? There you go. Was to make sure that what I was working on was the actual critical dodge windows for each of the attacks. I had done a bit of it last week, but not enough to showcase the demo. So on each attack now, there's a window um, that happens, like on the turret fire, where you can dodge, and you'll be able to do a critical dodge, which boosts your speed and does a little animation or whatever, and then actually sets a kind of a ghost target that the AI tracks instead of you, so it kind of leads them off where you were. Got that all working for each of the attacks. Like there's a window for a swipe, and there is a window for jumping, and then for each of the rockets too. So rockets, like when they're about to hit you, sets a bool flag, and there's a system that kind of determines, yeah, jump, and then it's back to regular. So all that was looking good. Got that taken care of on the first day. So I think the next day I was moving on to um, testing out the full behavior cycle of the AI. Last demo, it was clear that there was a lot of stuff I did last week, but it was clear there's the full cycle was in very rough shape. Um, Especially when it comes to like losing the target or the special case where the target is stunned or things like that. So I had to go and really test and like look for any issues to make sure that in any case when he's stunned that he can't like reacquire you or any odd issues. And I got it pretty tightened up. It's only at the end of this week I actually spotted a few more slight subtle bugs um, like when he's stunned is nothing should be happening, but uh, as far as it's concerned, like all the other functionality that like an AI previously has, like footsteps alert, shot detection alert, things like that, being able to be alerted, and all the things you would expect of the other AIs, that's all actually tested, working, and functional now. So, and there's no major issues now with the full cycle of losing a target, reacquiring a target, all that. So really solidified that on Tuesday. Um, on the next day, I was doing some sort of thing where I had to actually do what I did with the snake. So on like a lost target, it was a bit complex to do, given that given the between like I had to really do a lot of testing between different melee attacks, whether to stop or not stop, like the stopping distance between jumping and tracking and all that. So it was a little bit of, and it almost got to the point where it was too complex, and I had to I was thinking about like refactoring and cleaning things up, but I was able to stretch and make it work pretty good with the behavior graph to make sure that the distances where he stops between range, like and shooting, and all the different attacks are all looking pretty good. And then one thing I had to do with the lost state, I had to implement what I did for the snake controller, to where when you lose the target, it'll use like a global EQS query to kind of make the AI investigate a point that's actually close to the area where the actual target is. So it'll lose the target briefly, but then it'll come back to where you are and kind of like reacquire you. So got that working all good. Um, one of the behaviors that I had to implement that I wanted to mention was the ability for the AI to actually move backwards, strafe backwards. So before, what would happen, one of the big cases is that if you went underneath him, when I was ironing out the behavior graph issues, if you go underneath him, like his line of sight will lose you and instantly. You could just basically lose you if you just run right underneath them. So basically, I had to implement some custom functionality to say, hey, even if you don't have line of sight, don't lose the target right away. And also, instead of like just closing the distance, if you're actually too close and like you need to be in ranged, you should like if you're within combat distance, you should actually back up like that. So that took some doing. That added a bit of complications to my movement, but it solved a lot of issues where you're just too close and like you're just losing target, and it's like, yeah, he would be like, where'd the target go? And you're just right underneath him. So now it handles it mostly properly, but that took some doing, and it added some complications where it's just more complications means more areas for bugs to appear, but I think it's looking pretty good, so I wanted to mention that. I then kind of moved on to working on the next part of the EQS system, which is how does the AI handle like line of sight, like if you're in cover, how does it handle line of sight? And this is kind of a stretch because this wasn't just copying over like get the EQS target the target. This was something different where I kind of had to implement like take the next step and utilizing EQS to like get the right point on certain conditions. Like when you lose line of sight, and there's a whole bunch of like complexities and stuff when it comes to like losing the player's sight. Like just make sure it's working in all cases. Like losing a player's sight on cover versus being in cover, and just a whole bunch of the testing. And it was almost too complex where I got it to like a 70%, but it was just like, I just felt like it was just not ready for prime time. Like I'm not sure if it like actually makes like a valuable difference. It's just almost like a really prototype experiment thing where I want to take the EQS to the next level. So when he loses sight of the target, he kind of does like a strafing and gets positions. And the test that I use to get that target point, it's kind of, it's very, I mean, in the beginning I got it sort of working, but there was like 70% okay, and the rest of it was just like complete hot garbage. Where I got it to in the end, I would call it 90%, and it's like 10% is still hot garbage. It functions somewhat, but like I'm not even sure that it's like it just felt like bad engineering, kind of like what I was doing with the in the beginning with the boss turret controller. Like I got it doing something, but like I think it would definitely need. It's a start. I think on my next attempt, like trying to make EQS do something like strafe around cover, like dynamically, and get dynamic cover points based off the player's state and condition, and all that. Like it's a good start. I've understood the EQS system a little bit more and done a lot of testing around that. But as far as like repositioning on line of sight, like it works for the most part, but it's like it's not right now it doesn't feel like it's to that quality where I would feel comfortable putting in production, not until I've tested it a bunch more. But the actual prototype, it's a start. Spend a day on that. So I thought I'd be done with this prototype in the middle of the week, but it actually I extended out to the full week. So I took the EQS cover kind of prototype to how far it would go, and it's okay. It's not terrible. It's not broken. It's not janky, but it's just that last 10% where there's just to get it to really where I envisioned it to be. That's another story, but I didn't want to spend any more time right now on that. So it is, it's something. It's a prototype for handling AI repositioning when the player's in cover or out of line of sight, but we'll see if it actually um, gets into the final game as far as being like a production worthy quality. So that was that, and then on the last day, I decided to start finally uh, getting and doing the final bit of work, which is like the final polish, which is like sound effects and VFX. So um, I tried to do my regular footstep controller, um, like I do with the other AIs and the character, and that works okay with a biped. But for some reason, this one it was just inconsistent. Like, especially when the mech is turning, he would lift his legs and stuff, but it wouldn't actually register and send a sound for like contacting the ground and stuff. So, um, like it would work when he's walking for the most part, but I had to really go and test that out. But I had another possible solution, which was the legs animator, and basically it has like an event or something that you can hook into whenever the whenever one of the legs steps. And then I kind of added my own custom action to kind of send it specifically more information about which which leg stepped. So I kind of added on top of the third-party code, which is like this leg stepped, so I can get the transformed and spawn the sound right at the. And that was more reliable. So every time, like pretty much every time there's a step, you hear like a step sound. So got that done. And I just, like I went through and I thought I was close to being done by the end of the week, but I realized how many things required like sound effects implementation. So I made this, it's like the list that I thought was closing out like started to grow through. So, um, but basically everything that you can see, it's like uh, or everything that's going on. So you got stepping, every attack, like um, when there's the there's a bit of voice, like the boss voice, like when he loses and reacquires, there's some sound there. Like I added a whole slew of new sounds in Fmod, like, and it's just like the time-consuming part is like finding the sound that feels right and is close enough that can be used, and then putting the F into Fmod, adjusting each one of the levels, and then and then linking it all together through my system where um, adding these references and then linking the references through the string and the category. So yeah, for each one of these, and then depending on the context of the sound, some sounds can just be like one shot, like a footstep, but other sounds like the turret firing, they have to be like instances. So I have to kind of like what I did with the mech. So this is not like a new surprising. It's just a lot of work here. Kind of like with the mech, I just follow the examples where I have to create an instance, and then on the certain processes and timing, I have to start and stop the Where'd he go? Oh, I'm way over here. I have to start and stop the correct sound, like the turret sound spin start, and then kind of like I did with the mech controller, I have a loop that can cut out at any time, depending on firing, and I have to make sure that it's all little edge cases, like when he gets stunned, like the sound stops firing, like managing it through all cases. Um, one sound for each turret, and then the rocket launching sound, rocket launching, explosion, like, finding the right sound. So I found a lot of these sounds from Pixabay because I'm on a shoestring budget. I can't go and buy spend a lot of money on sound effects. So it's a combination of like free sound assets I got like on Pixabay or these other sites. I think I have two sites, and then there was also a Humble bundle that gave me a few more sound effects because that's kind of the area I'm a bit lacking in. Like trying to get like an explosion sound or something specific, it's a bit of a challenge. But eventually, I find good enough sound results in order to put the pieces together and then implement it, and I think it sounds pretty good at the end of the day. Um, so I got all the boss's behavior sounds taken care of, and I kind of moved on to the actual crane because the crane needs sounds too. So there's a crane, there's a sound that when the crane is moving, and then also let's just turn off the the crab tank for now. And then there's the interaction sound, click, and then a beep for the terminal. And then the third one, the drop sound, and then there's actually rigid body collision when it hits the ground or anything else. And then also, so just like a lot of everything. And there's also a sound when the rigid body collision hits the crab controller, crab tank. That's the same thing when it hits a mine. It gets like gets stunned. So mine explosion, and then you have this little stun sound effect. And then besides that, there's also like mine dispensing sound. So closing the mine dispenser, dropping, activation. There's a beep for the mine, deactivating, managing the sounds when it reactivates or you pick it up, and then opening this thing again. So a lot of, anything that's actually moving or doing something and needs a sound, so there's a lot of different requirements, but it really brings everything to life. And then I think the last thing was, yeah, so I got every sound that I thought I needed to get for the prototype, so there's nothing missing. Everything's ready for the final stage, gameplay, tuning, and balancing or whatever. I think the last thing I did was testing, doing VFX. So I did the same thing with the HK. There's like different, like depending on each critical damage, like there's visual effects going on to where, there's a little fire or something, a little sparks, like it just increases, and then it's like 3 stages of critical damage. But then the last one, I made sure to hook up the last bit of critical damage where you do the death animation, and then there's still something a little off about like trigger animations colliding with each other during certain state changes. I'm not sure. I'll have to do a little bit more testing on that, but it was working when I was testing it, but there's a lot of these little edge cases. But anyways, this final explosion, final big flame, just like the mech, and he's supposed to be lying on the ground. But the purpose of this prototype is to get it like 90% there, and then the last 10% of a gameplay testing and tuning is to really take it to the final production quality. But I have to make sure all the major pieces are there, and all the major cases are working. There's nothing like completely obvious that's broken or doesn't work properly, So Yeah, the final 10% is like the final polish, the final testing, the final gameplay, fine tuning, and all that kind of stuff. So, um, yeah, so I got the VFX all working right, um, and the sound effects looking good. Um, and then also, I think there's one last VFX that I wanted to do where it was the actual jump. I had to kind of change because the timing can be off depending on like. So I had to make it so that his rigid body controller can like contact the ground, and at the moment that it contacts the ground, then I send off the proper ground sound FX impact and the actual VFX. Just a little bit of For some reason he's not taking the stun very well, especially when he's. Yeah, he can do that sometimes. Like yeah, that's another issue I'll write down. Like if he's in the middle of attack and he tries to take a stun, like the other animation might fire off and override that stun animation. But yeah, when he does his jump, yeah, I have to, instead of just doing a rough timer like static, I have to like dynamically detect with a rigid body like when he hits the ground in order to play the sound effects and VFX at the proper time. It's a bit dynamic depending on if he's far or close, but we'll see. Yeah, just a little bit of a distortion shockwave and some dust in the sound. So getting that working right. Um, yeah, just a couple of things. So now I think for next week, I just have a handful of more things to do. I want to do a bunch of feedbacks for like when he jumps, like a radius feedback. There should be like a controller vibration shake and a screen shake, depending on how close to the center of the impact was. Same thing with rockets. Like if the rocket blast is close, you'll get some sort of feedback, um, depending on whether it's damage or just impact. What's it called? The explosion. Concussive force or whatever, that you're getting some sort of feedback based off a radius of how far it was away from you. So for the jump, and then a couple other things, like just basically doing the final feedbacks, like mine explosion. When you're dropping the container, there should be some sort of shake feedback, screen shake feedback, depending on how close you are. All based off distance. So it's a little different, but I'm sure it'll be no problem to handle next week. I have to implement some sort of functionality, kind of like I did with the rocket explosion radius. If you're in the radius and you hadn't dodged, it'll actually do damage to you. So same thing with feedback, where we're just applying like the distance from the center depends on how intense the feedback is. So that's for next week. And then I was actually doing the demo testing, and I actually spotted a few more bugs. So there's actually a couple bugs to polish up before I'm just like a handful of bugs that I want to take care of, and that should do it. I'm finally say that I'm to wrap up the prototype at the beginning of next week, and finally done with the 3 prototypes of this epic leg of the game project. So I think that about covers it. What I've done this week. Um, yeah, just required one more week to really put the final pieces in place for this prototype, but it's pretty much there. I would call it like 98% ready to go. So there's a few more things to wrap up next week, and then it's on to the next stage of development, and I have to do a project management planning session to see where I'm going next. But yeah, that is all for now. We will tune out and catch you next time.